Los Angeles, February 2013. A Canadian university student named Elisa stepped into the Cecil Hotel. She looked like any young traveler, cheerful, independent, and curious. In her hands, she carried a diary and an old camera to record her journey. But behind her smile lay a silence that was hard to explain. She didn't know that the building she checked into held more secrets than just empty rooms. The Cecil Hotel, located in the rundown district downtown, was like a place trapped in time, silent, dusty, and seemingly hiding something behind every floor. The receptionist greeted her with a flat smile and handed over her room key without much conversation. Elisa noticed some hotel staff glancing at her hesitantly, as if unsure whether to say something, but they held back. She walked to the elevator, quietly noting her experience in her mind. "This building feels dead," she murmured. The old elevator groaned softly as it rose to the 5th floor, sending a shiver down her spine. When the doors opened, a long corridor greeted her in silence. Only the sound of her footsteps echoed. The Cecil was no ordinary hotel. Built in 1927, it was once a symbol of luxury but gradually became a refuge for the homeless, addicts, and those wanting to disappear. Over decades, too many deaths occurred within its walls: suicides, murders, overdoses. The walls seemed to absorb every scream ever uttered. Rumor had it the building had a soul, dark, hungry, silently watching. Unaware of the hotel's grim history, Elisa began sensing subtle disturbances. She wrote in her journal, "The hallways feel like they're watching me." She started hearing footsteps outside her door at midnight, stopping right in front but never knocking. A strange smell, like rusted metal and wilted flowers, followed her near the emergency stairs. Faucets dripped even when the water was off. The TV turned on and off by itself. In restless sleep, she dreamed of walking endless corridors surrounded by doors that kept moving. The slow elevator, dim lighting, and constant low hum at night robbed her of sleep. She felt part of something older and darker than she imagined. Doubt crept in about her decision to stay, but curiosity held her back. Each night was a new puzzle, and the hotel seemed determined not to let her leave before solving it all. Room 506 seemed ordinary. A single bed, a small desk, and a tall mirror beside the wardrobe. But according to an old staff member, the room had been closed for 3 years after a guest was found dead inside. No one told Elisa she was staying in that very room. Her first night there felt colder than the hallway. She sat reading on the bed when the lights flickered and went out briefly. When she glanced toward the mirror, her reflection lagged behind her movements. When she raised her hand, the reflection moved a moment later, as if trying to catch up. She stood and stared silently into the glass. Suddenly, a dark shadow flickered behind her. She spun around quickly, but no one was there. That night, soft knocking woke her up. 3 taps. She opened the door and found only an empty hallway and cold air seeping in. But just as she was about to close the door, she caught a fleeting shadow at the far end of the corridor, too fast to identify, too real to ignore. The next morning, Elisa went down to the lobby, trying to calm herself. She asked the staff about the flickering lights and strange noises. They told her not to worry, old hotels are full of disturbances. But their uneasy expressions told another story. Back on the 5th floor, she examined the hallway more closely. At the far end hung a large mirror she hadn't noticed before. She stepped closer. The reflection showed the hallway stretching farther than it actually was. She paused, trying to spot something unusual. At that moment, she saw a black figure standing silently behind her, far away in the reflection. She spun around. The hallway was empty. She looked back at the mirror. The figure was gone. That second night was worse. Every time she passed the mirror, she felt someone following her from behind. Her own reflection no longer felt like her own. The smile was too wide. She wrote on her blog, "There's something alive behind the mirror." She decided to stay awake that night but couldn't fight the sleep. When she woke up, the mirror in her room was fogged from the inside, as if someone was breathing behind it. On the third day, Elisa decided to leave the hotel. She pressed the elevator button and waited. The elevator doors finally slid open, but as she stepped inside and pressed the button for the ground floor, the doors stubbornly refused to close. She pressed all the buttons in frustration, but nothing changed. The doors remained open, revealing the dimly lit hallway beyond. An uneasy feeling crept up her spine. Elisa backed into a corner of the elevator, her breath shallow. She felt as if she wasn't alone, though the security cameras showed only her movements. No one else appeared on the grainy footage. Time seemed to stretch, the elevator stuck somewhere between floors or perhaps between realities. She peeked out the doors briefly, then stepped back in. Her movements grew erratic, as if she was trying to communicate with an unseen presence. The elevator groaned and the lights flickered, yet no one came. Elisa realized that this wasn't just a broken elevator, it was a trap. That night, Elisa's restless mind was tormented by whispers. She could hear faint voices seeping through the thin walls of her room, barely audible yet unmistakably human. They murmured names she didn't recognize, cried out in fear and anger, and sometimes they begged for help. She pressed her ear against the wall, trembling. The voices seemed to come from the neighboring room, empty according to the hotel records. The sounds grew louder and more desperate, filling the air with a suffocating tension. Elisa's heart pounded as shadows flickered outside her door, though no one was there when she looked. She scribbled feverishly in her journal, "This hotel is alive. Remembers? It's haunted by those who never left." The line between past and present blurred, trapping Elisa inside a place that fed on lost souls and secrets best left buried. Elisa's unease deepened as the hotel revealed more of its sinister nature. Items in her room subtly shifted positions. Her diary lay open to pages she hadn't read, and her camera's battery inexplicably drained overnight despite no use. One evening, as she sat writing, she caught a flicker in the corner of her eye, a shadowy figure slipping behind a door frame, vanishing when she turned. The footsteps came at all hours, light and uneven, as if pacing nervously just beyond her door. Her attempts to capture these phenomena with her camera were futile. The footage showed nothing but static and fleeting glimpses of something dark and amorphous. The air itself felt colder around her, heavy with an unspoken presence. One night, she awoke to whispered words pressed so close to her ear that her skin crawled. The language was unfamiliar, harsh consonants and desperate tones, yet the emotion was clear. A plea for release, a call for help from those trapped within these walls. Elisa's heart hammered as she shivered under her covers, realizing she was sharing her room with spirits that refused to rest. Driven by a mixture of fear and curiosity, Elisa ventured once more down the long corridor on the 5th floor. At its farthest end, just beyond the ominous mirror, stood a heavy, rusted door she had never noticed before. Its paint was chipped and peeling, and the lock looked ancient, as though it hadn't been opened in decades. She reached out hesitantly and touched the cold iron handle. It was icy, almost painfully so, sending a shiver up her arm. Pressing her ear against the door, she caught faint noises, irregular breathing, scratching sounds, and muffled sobs that seemed too real to be imagined. The door seemed to throb with a dark energy, like a heartbeat trapped behind wood and metal. A sudden gust of cold air swept down the hallway, extinguishing the few flickering lights nearby. Elisa staggered back, breathless and shaken. Something, or someone, was locked behind that door, imprisoned in a space forgotten by time. And whatever it was waiting for her. In the days that followed, Elisa's relationship with the mirrors in the hotel grew increasingly disturbing. One afternoon, while brushing her hair in front of the tall mirror in her room, she noticed her reflection faltered. For a brief moment, her image flickered, then disappeared entirely, leaving only the empty room behind the glass. Panic surged through her as she instinctively reached out to touch the mirror's surface. Her fingers met cold, smooth glass, but the reflection remained absent. Heart pounding, she spun around. No one was there. When she looked back, her reflection returned, but something was different. Her eyes seemed hollow, her smile strained and unnatural. That night, Elisa's dreams were haunted by reflections, endless corridors lined with mirrors, each showing a different version of herself, distorted and trapped. She awoke gasping, feeling as though part of her had been left behind, locked inside the glass. Elisa's camera, once a tool for capturing memories, became a source of terror. Late at night, when the hotel was silent, she would review her footage, hoping for proof of the paranormal. Instead, she found chilling messages hidden in the static. One recording showed a dark figure standing just behind her, its features blurred but unmistakably human. As she rewound and played it frame by frame, distorted whispers seeped from the speakers, words she couldn't understand at first. Gradually, the words formed a message: "Help us. We're trapped." Her blood ran cold. The camera had captured cries from the hotel's restless spirits, voices that had been silenced for decades but were now reaching out through the veil of time and technology. Elisa realized that the hotel was not just a building, but a prison for lost souls, and she was caught in its grasp. The night was thick with silence when Elisa suddenly woke to a gentle but persistent tapping at her window. At first, she thought it might be the wind or a stray branch scraping against the glass, but the rhythmic taps soon grew more deliberate, insistent, as if someone or something was desperately trying to get her attention. Her heart pounded in her chest as she slowly rose and approached the window, her eyes straining to pierce the darkness beyond. Outside, the fire escape was empty and bathed in the dim glow of distant streetlights, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. The tapping stopped for a moment, only to resume, this time coming from the bedroom door, then the closet, and finally the mirror standing ominously across the room. A sudden cold draft swept through, chilling Elisa to the bone. The temperature dropped, and the shadows in the room deepened. Then came a whisper, a faint, sorrowful voice barely audible, yet unmistakable: "Don't forget us." It echoed from every corner, seeping into her skin, a haunting plea from the trapped souls who lingered in the hotel's dark corners. Frozen and breathless, Elisa realized she was not alone in that room. The night visitor was no mere ghost, it was a warning. A message carried by the restless spirits trying to reach out, desperate not to be forgotten or left behind in eternal darkness. Elisa's diary had become more than just a record of her experiences. It was a confidant, a fragile link between her and the mysteries surrounding her. One morning, as she leafed through the pages, she noticed words and passages she had no memory of writing. The handwriting was frantic, hurried, almost desperate. The new entries described terrifying events yet to come. A shadowy figure stalking the hotel's corridors, a malevolent presence feeding on the growing fear and despair within the walls. Most chilling was the warning that the mirror in her room was not just a reflection but a gateway, a fragile barrier between the living and the trapped souls desperate to cross over. Her hands trembled as she read the final, scrawled sentence: "If you find this, beware the mirror. It's not glass, it's a door to the other side." The diary slipped from her fingers, thudding softly on the floor. A heavy silence settled over the room, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Elisa felt the weight of the hotel's dark history closing in. Time was running out. She had to face what lurked behind the mirror before it was too late. Every time Elisa passed by the mirror, a cold shiver ran through her spine, as if the glass itself exhaled a frozen breath. One quiet evening, under the flickering hallway light, she stopped and stared directly into the mirror's surface. Slowly, the reflection began to distort, rippling like the surface of a dark, still pond disturbed by an unseen force. Beneath the glass, shadowy figures flickered and danced, their forms twisted and ephemeral. Faces emerged from the darkness, agonized, silent screams frozen forever in time. Elisa's breath hitched when one pale, gaunt woman's face separated itself from the rest. The woman's hollow eyes locked with Elisa's, filled with an unbearable sorrow, and her translucent hands stretched forward as if begging for salvation. Elisa stumbled backward, her heart pounding wildly. The mirror's surface calmed, the eerie images vanishing as if they had never been there. But the image lingered in her mind, a haunting echo she could not shake. Was it a warning? A plea? Or an invitation into the darkness behind the glass? Driven by a desperate need to understand, Elisa scoured the hotel's dusty archives late into the night. Among yellowed newspapers and brittle documents, she uncovered a faded article dated decades ago. The headline detailed the mysterious disappearance of a young woman from room 506, the very room Elisa was staying in. The article spoke of strange occurrences linked to the room, inexplicable sounds, flickering lights, and reports of shadowy figures seen in the hallway. Most disturbing were rumors of occult rituals performed in secret, attempts to breach the barrier between the living world and the unknown beyond. The door at the end of the fifth-floor corridor had been sealed shut after police discovered cryptic symbols etched into its frame and remnants of what appeared to be ancient ceremonies. The woman's disappearance was never solved. Locals whispered that her spirit remained trapped behind that locked door, caught in a liminal space between life and death, bound by the dark curse woven into the hotel's very foundations. Armed with this grim knowledge, Elisa realized that the door was not merely a locked passage, it was a prison cell for restless souls. Whatever lay beyond could hold the key to her escape, or to becoming yet another lost presence within the hotel's shadowed walls. As Elisa spent more time within the hotel's gloomy confines, she became increasingly aware of a subtle but unnerving presence. The walls themselves seemed to carry voices. At first, it was a faint murmur, barely distinguishable from the creaks and groans of the aging building. But gradually, those murmurs grew into whispering voices, soft, desperate, as if the very plaster and brick were soaked with sorrow. One night, drawn by a strange compulsion, Elisa pressed her ear against a cracked section of the wall near her bed. The whispers sharpened, forming fragmented words and broken sentences. "Find the key, release us, trapped forever, help us." The voices echoed around her head, a chorus of lost souls begging for salvation. The sensation was chilling, like the hotel's walls were a cage, capturing the last echoes of those who had suffered and perished within. The whispers seemed to claw at her sanity, a constant reminder that the building wasn't just old, it was alive with pain, grief, and a hunger for freedom. Driven by the haunting pleas, Elisa combed every corner of the fifth floor in search of the key that might unlock the secrets behind the locked door. Hours passed, the flickering hallway lights casting long shadows that danced and shifted ominously. Near the end of the corridor, behind a loose, rotting wooden panel hidden beneath peeling wallpaper, her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. Heart-pounding, she pried it loose and revealed an ornate, ancient key. Its surface was covered with strange symbols, twisting lines and indecipherable runes that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light, almost as if the key possessed a life of its own. As she held it, a wave of mixed emotions washed over her: hope, dread, and a creeping sense that unlocking the door could unleash forces beyond her control. The air grew heavier, the shadows deepened, and even the mirror's surface rippled as if in anticipation. With the key clenched tightly in her hand, Elisa approached the ominous door at the end of the hall. The whispered voices crescendoed around her, urging her forward. She took a deep breath, steeling herself to confront whatever horrors awaited beyond the threshold. Elisa's fingers trembled as she grasped the cold, ancient key, the metal rough against her skin. She slid it into the lock, its teeth fitting with a reluctant resistance. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a deep, grating sound filled the silence as the lock surrendered. The heavy wooden door creaked open slowly, revealing a yawning darkness beyond. A rush of frigid air spilled out like a ghostly breath, carrying a sickly scent of damp earth, rot, and faintly metallic undertones, an iron tang like old blood. Elisa's flashlight flickered, its weak beam barely piercing the thick blackness that seemed to swallow sound and light alike. Her heart hammered as she peered into the abyss, a narrow stairwell spiraling downward into what felt like the bowels of the hotel, descending far beneath the world above. The whispers, once faint, swelled into a chorus, urgent and insistent, wrapping around her like icy fingers. "Come, free us, face the darkness." The door groaned shut behind her, the echo sealing her fate. Each tentative step down the crumbling stone stairs seemed to carry her further away from safety and deeper into a realm where light dared not linger. Faint noises echoed, a dragging sound, a soft moan, and a whisper that barely brushed her ear, "You belong here now." At last, the stairs ended in a cavernous underground chamber, its high ceilings lost in shadows. Elisa's flashlight danced over relics of a forgotten time, tattered furniture draped in cobwebs, yellowed photographs of faces distorted by time, and strange objects that seemed to pulse with dark energy. The walls were painted with cryptic symbols and runes, smeared in a dried, rusty substance that gleamed faintly in the flashlight's beam. At the center of the room was a large, eerie circle etched deep into the stone floor, ringed by the remnants of blackened candles and scattered bones. Broken shards of a massive mirror lay strewn within the circle, catching the light in sinister glints. Elisa's breath caught as she noticed faint, smeared handprints, frantic attempts to escape, frozen in glass fragments. The oppressive air was thick with despair and trapped anguish. A shadow shifted just beyond the reach of her light. Figures seemed to flicker at the edge of her vision, lost souls bound by ancient rituals and dark sorcery. The chamber was a prison, a trap for the restless dead. And now, Elisa was entwined in their fate, a living witness to the hotel's darkest secret. As Elisa stood trembling in the dim chamber, the shadows began to ripple and shift, coalescing into a vague, towering figure. Its eyes, deep and hollow, glowed faintly with an otherworldly light, seeming to look straight into Elisa's soul. The air around her grew icy cold, thick with an oppressive silence broken only by the distant rhythmic dripping of water echoing through the underground. The figure moved toward her slowly, its form flickering like a candle flame in a draught. Despite the terror that should have rooted her in place, Elisa felt a strange wave of sorrow wash over her, a deep melancholy emanating from the spirit. She realized with a pang that this was the same woman she had seen in the mirror, the tormented soul trapped for decades, desperate for freedom. The ghost's voice was barely a whisper, like the wind fading through cracked walls. "Thank you for releasing me from the darkness." But before Elisa could respond, the chamber trembled violently, dust falling from the ceiling. The shadows writhed and stretched, and the very walls seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Something ancient and malevolent had been awakened by the breaking of the seal. Elisa's heart hammered against her ribs as the air grew thick with a suffocating dread. She understood suddenly that freeing one spirit had unleashed a greater evil lurking beneath the hotel's foundation, a darkness hungry for souls, now turning its gaze upon her. Panic surged through Elisa's veins as she turned and fled up the crumbling staircase. The whispers transformed into snarls and hisses, shadows lunging at her heels, clawing to pull her back into the abyss. Every breath was ragged, every step desperate, as the darkness sought to claim her as it had claimed so many before. Bursting through the heavy door, she slammed it shut behind her, the sound reverberating through the empty halls like a gunshot. The oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly, replaced by the cold, sterile silence of the hotel's fifth floor. But Elisa knew the curse was not broken. It was merely dormant, waiting for the next unfortunate soul. Back in her room, she stared at the mirror, now cracked and dull, the eerie smile erased. Exhausted and shaken, she packed her things with trembling hands. Before the first light of dawn, Elisa left the Cecil Hotel, stepping into the cold morning air as the city slowly woke around her. Though free from the hotel's grasp, the memories clung to her like a shadow. Whispers in the night, the ghostly face in the mirror, and the chilling reminder that some places are prisons for the lost, and some doors should never be opened.